Hey there, welcome to another episode of On Our Pursuit. I just wrapped up recording with today's guest, Elyse Archer, and I am extremely excited for you to get into this conversation. Real quick, I want to give you Elyse's bio and then a few things to pay attention to as you listen to the episode, and then we'll get to it. We'll keep it short and sweet. So if you go to Elyse's website, ElyseArcher.com, you will see that she is the founder of the Superhuman selling and She Sells movement. It's a hard thing for me to say, She Sells, which empower entrepreneurs and sales professionals, especially women, to revolutionize how they sell, explode their income, and achieve quantum leaps in all areas of life. And I love the all areas of life because, as you know, it's way more than money as we go on our pursuit and we find our authentic life. There is a little clue in that statement, though, as to why I asked Elyse to come on versus any other coach that might be out there. It's the quantum leaps part. Elyse has a unique approach through her personal experience that she's now bringing to the people that she helps into the content that brings into this world of quantum physics into sales and just life coaching, if you will. That is why I was excited to get connected with Elyse. A mutual friend of ours got us connected, and in our first conversation, 5-10 minutes in, she mentioned an individual by the name of Joe Dispenza, who is a very well-known person in the world of quantum physics and the law of attraction conversations. You know, there's Eckhart Tolle who's out there, Bob Proctor, Joe Dispenza's right up there with them. So when she mentioned Joe, I knew we had way more in common than initially we thought we might, and good things would come from there. So I asked her to come on to talk about how she has incorporated quantum physics and these mindset approaches to not only her life, but to the people that she is helping through her content and with her businesses. As you get into the episode, there's three things I want to point out. There's lots of great things, but pay attention for three things. The first, the impact her mindset had on changing the trajectory of her life. She talks about a decade that was a tough time for her and how she was able to get herself out of that, very much contributed by her mindset. So pay attention to that. The second is the importance of the fact that abundance comes from within, not from without. You've heard me say similar things, but I really like how Elyse points out that to move forward and achieve the life that you want, you have to find the abundance from within and don't look for it from outside sources. And then the final thing I want you to pay attention to as a parent, and if you are a parent or might be a parent in the future, how can we take these powers that we know to be true, law of attraction, the power of your mindset, the things that we know that are backed by science through quantum physics, how can we help our kids learn that at an age much earlier than we do? So she has a great answer there, and I think when you hear it, it's kind of obvious, but pay attention to that as well. All right, so those are the things I want you to pay attention to, but I also want to ask you the favor I ask you before every episode. If you hear something that Elyse talks about that resonates with you, or you have a story to share, hit pause, drop a note in the comments so she can see or hear the feedback that allows her to know that she's making an impact with her story. Because at the end of the day, that's why we do these things. We enjoy creating, we enjoy sharing our message, but ultimately we do so because we want to impact people positively. So let her know how her story impacted you or something that you're going to take away from this episode and try to move yourself forward and closer to your authentic life. All right, that's enough from me. Let's get to this awesome episode with my friend Elyse Archer. We're going to start in a different way than usual. So I'll have you give a little bit of your background here in a moment, but there is a statement on your website that I absolutely love, and it says it's time to achieve quantum leaps. Mm. And I'm wondering if a lot of people, if they saw that, would miss out on the quantum part and think about something else. But when we first met in our first conversation, I think within 5 minutes you mentioned Joe Dispenza. And as soon as you mentioned Joe, I was like, oh, okay, Elyse and I, there's a reason the universe has brought us together. We are connected amongst this. And I'm just curious, kind of, what was your introduction to Joe? And for those of you at home who don't know who Joe Dispenza is, he's a doctor. He had a crazy accident, kind of basically through the power of the mind and the universe, nursed himself back to health, and then now kind of speaks to this. So you should look him up. I'll have a link in the show notes. But it's very much into the power of the universe, law of attraction, quantum physics types of things. So how did you find that, and what has that meant to you in your life?
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that, like, when you're ready, you encounter it. And, I will say I grew up with zero exposure to any of that. And I grew up in a very, analytical type of family. Like, both my parents were super smart Ivy League grads. It was all academics, and like no fault of them. It was just kind of what they knew. And of course they're like brilliant in their own way there. But so I was never exposed to anything about, personal development, law of attraction, quantum physics. And I think what ended up happening along the way is I pursued things based on what I deemed to be success. So I found myself in my mid-20s kind of having created the life that I thought I was supposed to be happy. I think many of us may be able to relate to this type of a story where I had, I was very successful in corporate media sales, had nice house, nice car, all the things that I thought were going to make me happy. And inside, I was struggling so much and I wasn't telling anybody. And I was struggling with panic attacks, anxiety. I was in a marriage that was really unhealthy in a lot of ways. I had an eating disorder I wasn't telling anybody about. And I also was really struggling with money and lack mindset. Even though like I had money coming in, I always felt in scarcity. I always felt afraid I was going to lose it. I always felt not good enough. But it was like, I wasn't telling anyone about this. And I felt like I kind of was in this self-imposed prison I couldn't get out of. You know, it's like when you're in it, you can't see your way out. Mm-hmm. And so for me, 28 has always been a really special number. I was born on the 28th. I see 28s everywhere. It's just my number. And I remember right before I turned 28, I said, I am not going to have this 28th year of my life be the same as the past. It had been probably a decade of struggle in a lot of different ways. And I said, I don't care what it takes. I'm willing to kind of leave everything behind that I know that I've created around me in order to see what's on the other side of this. And so in a very short amount of time, I left the marriage. Was terrified of what that would look like, but left the marriage. I had a quote unquote secure corporate job. I left that to go out and start my own business. And that's really what started my personal development journey. Cause I around the time was starting to listen to podcasts and I had started to get opened up to the personal development world. But I would say it was still kind of dipping my toe in the water. Like I'm sure somewhere along there, I heard about Joe Dispenza, heard about manifestation, quantum physics, but it was more just in like, I don't know if you've maybe experienced this in your own life. I understood it intellectually, like I could wrap my brain around it, but I always felt like I was someone who like, I would make the vision board and I would look at it and nothing would ever happen on it. And I'd just be frustrated. And I was like, well, other people can do this, works for other people, but not for me. And so I kind of started that journey there. And life changed incrementally. I never had the quantum leap experience, at least not yet up until this point of the story. Life changed incrementally. I met an absolutely amazing man I'm married to now, the father of my children, launched my business, had a decent amount of success there. And yet I was still finding myself in this struggle, this kind of perpetual struggle with lack of self-worth. I couldn't break a certain income threshold no matter what I did. I couldn't make the amount of money I wanted to make and I couldn't figure out why. And, I found myself consistently living kind of this like okay, but not great life. If you can relate to that, it was like things were good, but not great. And 4 months after my first son was born, I know you all have kids, like you get this, like there's a lot of sitting there cuddling the babies. There's a lot of time. I found myself reading a lot more. And I'd been reading this book by Bronnie Ware, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Have you read it? Are you familiar?
Yeah, I've read it and I've referenced it on podcast and in my writing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the five Regrets of the Dying. Yes, it's a powerful book. It's
so powerful. And it's interesting how the universe aligns. So like I read this book, I started getting context for how much of my life was still like about striving for what I thought was going to make me happy and successful, like a certain amount of accolades with my work, certain amount of money, etc. And yet I still felt like I was in this prison somewhat of just lack and limitation and limiting beliefs about what was possible for me. And right around the same time, I was working with a coach who took me through this exercise that I thought it was going to be a really innocent exercise. And it wasn't. It was called Your 5 Dream Lives. And in essence, and I would really encourage this for anyone who kind of feels like they're stuck in a loop, but they can't figure out how to get out. You look back at all the things that you thought you wanted to do when you were growing up, or you look at, if I could just start over and wipe the slate clean and have any 5 dream lives, my life, what would they be? And I had pigeonholed myself into, I'm successful in business, I'm a good wife, I'm a good mom, etc. But it was like, I did this exercise and stuff started showing up for me. Like, I want to be a philanthropist. I want to launch a magazine that inspires women around the world. Like, I want to be able to give and live a much bigger life than I am. And I started thinking about it, and it was like, I started looking at other people who had done it. And I realized no one had come to give them permission to go after what they really wanted. And that I was the only one in that moment who could give myself the permission to actually live life, the bigness of life that I desired. And I just committed in that moment, and it was uncomfortable, and it was like not convenient timing. We had a young child. I was thinking I was just going to kind of coast for a while, but I committed, like, I am not going to let my life go to waste. And I'm going to trust that these desires and these visions and these things that I've said I want to do, but have said someday or maybe to, that I'm actually meant to do them, but I'm the only one who can give myself permission. And I knew I had to get out of the box that I still found myself in of self-doubt, lack, limitation, low self-worth. Who am I to do this, etc. And so I just committed. I was like, all right, universe, God, show me the path. Like, I'll do what I need to do. Show me the path. And, as you probably know, when you ask, be prepared for what you receive, because it was like the very next day or the day after, I was listening to a podcast episode of a coach and a mentor who I kind of casually followed, had never invested in any of her programs, but she specialized in helping women become millionaires, and not like moms specifically become millionaires. And as I had gone through the Dream Lives exercise, I looked at how much the things were going to require, how much money the things were going to require that I wanted to do. And it was like, there's no way I'm going to do this on the amount of money I'm making right now and on this like limited money mindset I'm working with. And so she said, hey, I've got space for a private coaching client or two. Here's how you apply. I was like, I just felt nudged. I said, all right, I'll take the bait. I'll apply, fill out the application, get on a call with her. And, everything is like, yes, 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 yes. This is perfect. I felt very intuitively like I was meant to do it. And then I find out that the investment to work with her is half of what I made the whole year previously. And I hadn't been saving that money for coaching either. Like, I'll say, you can say, Elyse, there's a lot of things you could have been doing differently with your money. You should have been saving more, but I wasn't in that mindset at the time. And so I hadn't been saving the money, but it was such a strong nudge. Like, you have to do this, primarily because I knew it would get me so out of my comfort zone and so out of this hamster wheel I'd been on, to figure out, number one, how to even make the coaching payment. Number two, I knew I would have to become a different woman in the process. I could no longer be stuck in limitation, lack of self-worth, self-doubt, because I had to literally rise to the occasion to be the one who could afford this and who would then actually turn this into something really good for myself and my family. And so I surrendered. I said, yes, I'll do it. Was able to put the deposit on a credit card. And I went into a period of a lot of fear and panic of what I had just done. It was like, I'd followed my intuition. I'd followed the nudges, but I was the breadwinner for our family, had a 4-month-old son. I was like, what did I just do? Did I just put our family in financial peril? But I knew I then had to finally look at all of the things that had been holding me back. Mm-hmm. And so simultaneously, it's like these resources start coming in. I'm just like, I will pay attention to whatever resources come to help support me in this. Started getting connected to things like Joe Dispenza's work much more deeply. Bob Proctor's work, started studying like what's really at the core of this lack and scarcity mindset I've had for a long time. I started meditating and doing the work with much higher intention than I'd ever done, because I had to. Literally, like, our family's life was on the lines. So it felt. Started doing some of like Joe's abundance meditation, started realizing that we generate abundance from the inside out. It's not something that we seek outside of us. And that was a big part of the problem, and why I felt stuck and like I never had what I wanted, because I was always seeking something outside of me rather than learning to cultivate it inside. And about 3 weeks after that, and this is a bit of a long answer, I'm close to the end, but I think it'll hopefully give some good context.
It's great.
Yeah. About like 3 weeks of really intensely doing that work. with a firm intention. Nothing changed yet on the outside, but I started feeling differently. I started doing the meditations and I felt my heart open up and realized for decades it had been blocked. I started literally like doing these meditations and crying tears of gratitude in the morning just because I suddenly loved myself and I loved life so much more, even though nothing had shifted on the outside. And that was the first big change. And then about 3 weeks after that, through continuing to do the work, I was working with this mentor. I launched a new program. But I was feeling abundant first. I want to make that very clear. About 3 weeks after that, so 6 weeks total from really intentionally doing this work, I started turning my annual income into my monthly income. Things shifted dramatically in my life. Clients, attraction, it was like stuff started feeling like it was coming from nowhere. And I actually had the final, like, visceral understanding of, oh my gosh, this stuff works. And it wasn't the old, like, matter on matter approach I'd been taking where I worked so hard, hustled, grinded, and was stressed out, exhausted, and burnt out. It was like inspired action, aligned action. But most importantly, I had shifted how I felt on the inside. I was emanating a different vibration and frequency that then changed what I was bringing in, and what I was attracting to me. And it shifted my whole life. It shifted my family's life. I've gone on to do and pursue a lot of the things that showed up in the Dream Lives exercise from there. So I'll stop because that was, like I said, a long answer, but that's how I got connected, and it's been transformational.
No, I'm glad you went deep into it, because the tough thing about this topic is, you and I we understand it, but the way we grew to understand it is we experienced it. And I think it's hard for people to trust that if we just change the way we view ourselves and how we feel internally and send out a different energy into the world, that we can change the experience that we're having. Like, that goes against everything that we're taught. So my hope is, through the content that I create, the guests that I have on, the more stories people hear, the more they may allow themselves to believe that it's possible and open up to experiencing it themselves. Because once you experience it, or I also think once you connect to that you've already experienced it in your life, you just didn't know it, then you become more aware of it and you can begin to be more intentional and see, the impact it can have. Like, my introduction to this space is a little bit different. When I can't even remember how exactly first getting into it, but it's weird how things have kind of laid themselves out. Like, I remember coming across Eckhart Tolle years ago, reading the outlook of the power of now, and be like, that sounds crazy. And then coming back a few years later, and it's like, that was the perfect time. But I look back even to earlier in my life, I was manifesting without knowing that that's what I was doing. And I hate using the term manifestation, because I think it's been watered down and people don't really realize that it's not just wanting something. It's the combination of wanting it, seeing it, embodying it, and then going and putting in the work. Like, the putting in the work part, I think, gets lost when it's a marketing tactic of manifestation. But the story I always love to give was, in high school, going into my junior year, I was going to make the varsity basketball team. I was pretty confident I was going to start, but I didn't know. It wasn't confirmed yet. And during the beginning of the football season, our quarterback got hurt. Our backup's last name was Justin. And there was a headline in the newspaper that said, Justin to start this Sunday, I think, something like that. Well, I cut that headline out and I just kept the Justin to start and put it on this little cork board I had in my room. And before long, I'm starting shooting guard, and the rest is history. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I looked at that statement every single day and I believed it. I went and put in the work, and then that's what happened. So I looked at it like I had never even heard of manifestation back then, but I was already in me to do that. And then I look at a lot of the things that I've tried to achieve or goals I've set. Most of them have come to fruition. I don't know if that's all because of this power of attraction and everything, or maybe I've set my sights too low and I didn't go big enough and fail from time to time. But it's something that I always had in me, and now I know it's there. So the last year has been really about working to how can I use this to achieve the goals that I want to have going forward, because now they're bigger. And then you mentioned kind of your limitations in relationship with money. I've been an advisor for 18 years, but for a long part of my career, I was afraid to have a goal of making more money. Like, I never wanted to have a goal of, I want an income of X. my thought was, I want to do right by people, do a good job, and money will take care of itself. And it always has. And what I learned was it wasn't a scarcity mindset that was limiting my income potential. It was a fear of making money my focus and like out of greed and out of ego, and that would bring bad things to me. So I just thought, I'm not going to try to make more money. But now I've removed that fear because my intentions of making more money and making as much money as possible is so I can go do good things with it. It's not about me buying more stuff. It's about me. I don't know if you watched Ted Lasso, but the most recent episode of Ted Lasso, there's a character that owns the soccer team, and her friend has her business yanked away from her by VCs. And she's like, well, how much were they backing you for? And she's like, writes her a check. And I was like, I want to have money to be able to do things like that, help people out when they're in need and not even think twice about it. So anyways, different introductions to this world, but it gets us at the same point. And then you and I getting connected, because of the law of attraction and how these things work. Absolutely. So it's one thing to realize it for yourself and use it to move your career and your goals, but you've chosen to bring these powers that may be to helping your clients and the content that you create. What was it about your personal experience that said, hey, I need to get more people to understand and see these powers to help them? Because it would have been very easy for you just to keep on using that for you to grow and helping coach people without bringing that to the table, because I think you could be limiting the number of people you might be able to serve because you're too woo-woo. So how'd you determine, say, hey, I don't care what people think, I'm going to bring Joe Dispenza's work and all this stuff to the work I do with my clients?
Gosh, I so appreciate that question. It's honestly one of the things that, like, even to this day, I'm kind of like, how do I approach this in a way that's not alienating? Because I think, like, you get this, you probably toe the same line, right? Like, you're given your background and what you do, and I'm similar. And I've come from such a corporate background. And even today, a lot of the clients I work with are like financial advisory firms, and I do partnerships with companies like Salesforce. And it's always kind of towing that line of, how do I serve and really help people with what I know is at the root of the problem? And how do I help them implement the things that I know will really help, and yet say it in a way that people can hear who maybe are not quite as far along on the journey yet. And so for me, it's all positioning. And I think that's the importance of understanding the science behind it. It's actually, and to anyone who's listening and they're like, they haven't had the embodied experience, kind of like you talked about, you and I have both actually felt it. And I think once you feel it, even if you can't fully explain it, you just have a deep inner knowing of this is truth. We're creators. We're here to create our reality. But studying the science and incorporating the science in my coaching has been really, really important, because I think, and Joe talks about this too, science is a pretty universal language. So a lot of times if we use, to your point, using like, and I use manifestation all the time in my language, but if I was speaking to someone who maybe wasn't familiar, hadn't heard it for the first time, I would just speak to the science behind the subconscious mind, right? And neuroscience and kind of speak that language as well. There's a big part of me that when I had this experience for myself, wanted to swing all the way in the direction of coaching clients on manifestation, quantum physics, energy. And I kind of let myself go there, and ended up shifting a lot of my work with my clients to focus on that, because I think one of the biggest problems is, and this is one of the things in my industry in sales, people are like, oh, to grow your sales, you just need a better script. You just need a better process. And is that important? And can that help? Yes. And when you study the science of the subconscious mind, that's going to lead to that's 2 to 5% of your results is what comes from action and from the analytical mind. The remainder of our results, 95 to 98%, is all based on our belief systems, all based on our self-identity. And so if we can get under the hood and help someone shift their self-concept, learn how to become a match for what they're looking for, because to your point before, it's not just like sitting on a cushion and letting everything come to you. There's action involved in what we're doing here. But the question is always, is it aligned action, or is it action from a place of separation and scarcity and lack and kind of the older mindset here? When we can help someone with the inner work, the outer results naturally will match that. And so my clients were coming into my programs and having like quantum leaps just from doing that inner work. So they already knew how to work hard. They already knew how to hustle and grind and take the action, but they weren't showing up as a match for what they wanted. So we'd have clients coming in and literally creating like $270,000 in a new program in 90 days, or going from $0 months as an entrepreneur to $50,000 months within 6 months. And it's like they were having these experiences and these results. And it was really all I wanted to teach. And yet I keep getting kind of pulled into the sales world. And so that's something that I really trust. Again, following the nudges, like I'm meant to still speak to sales, help people with sales. But this is something I say to clients on discovery calls. Like, if you want to work with me as your coach, I need to be able to speak this language. I need to be able to do this inner work with you. Otherwise, I'm not going to be a good fit for you, because I know how important it is. So I do both. It depends on the audience in terms of like the language that I use. That's why I love this podcast. I love the work you're doing. It's literally like a dream come true to be able to speak to someone in the financial world who's an advisor himself, successful, and who gets this, because this is rare. Like being able to have this type of conversation is really rare, and it's my favorite thing and exciting. But I think it's all about knowing the audience and then again, speaking it in a way that they can hear.
Yeah, that's the unique spot that I find myself in when I have my advisor hat on. So my clients, they didn't come to me when I was this version of myself. So I didn't even, like, I wasn't speaking any of this. So I have chosen to say, everybody who's been with me from day one, we maintain the same relationship we've always had. You're reading and hearing what I'm talking about today. If that resonates, let's bring that to the table. But I'm not going to force you to do this stuff. Going forward, I'm only going to bring people to the table that want to talk about this. And if that takes me 3 years to find my first client, that's perfectly fine. But going forward, I want to do this. I look forward to the day that part of my recommendations on a financial plan, we've got the investment planning, the savings planning, all those, but we also have like an energy planning. Like, are your thoughts in alignment with the goals that you want? So like, let's not just do the traditional stuff. Let's make sure that you're doing the personal work to make sure that the energy you're putting out is pulling you towards these goals that we're planning for. Because, it's great to have all these savings and other things, but if you're sabotaging your own financial plan because of your mindset, then all these numbers probably won't come to fruition because something else is going to blow it up. I'm not to that point yet, but that's where I want to go. And I think that'll be a really cool day, that when I have my first financial plan that includes manifestation as a part of the recommendation. That'll be awesome.
I freaking love that, by the way. Like, that's brilliant. That's so needed too. It's
going to happen. I'm going to manifest. It's going to come with time.
Absolutely.
All right. I know you're probably not excited to see me in the middle of the episode interrupting, but we've been talking about mindset, and I just wanted to remind you that earlier this year, I recorded a free download of 5 guided meditations to help you begin to connect your spirit, mind, body, and money. So I wanted to put that back on your radar in case you are now at the point where that might be something that will be a benefit to you. I want to remind you that it's there. It's over on pursuit.co. Go to PRST.co. Look up at the download section in the shop and download those 5 episodes for free. They're 10 to 12 minutes. Again, a guided meditation to help you align and begin to get in touch with your spirit, mind, body, and money. That's all for today. Don't forget the guided meditation. If it can help you, it's there. Free download. We don't even ask for your email. You just go in and download it, and you can do the meditations and hopefully get closer to your authentic life. All right, let's get back to this conversation with Elyse. Can you give an example, maybe a high-level example of how, and when you talk about making sure that the internal, matches where you want to go externally? Like for somebody that hasn't dove into this before, what do you mean when you say that? What does that look like?
Sure. So one of the things I became very clear on through this whole process, through having kind of my own financial quantum leap and money and sales quantum leap, was your level of income will never exceed your level of self-worth. And so I think this is, and again, I can just kind of share from my own personal experience. I used to set goals, and I would set business goals and career goals. And I've shifted how I do things. I was someone who went for the money initially. And so I so appreciate your approach to your firm and how you've grown, because I think that that's the absolute best way to do it. I was struggling with a lot of self-belief and self-worth issues. And so I kind of made money my validation for so long, but I would set these financial goals and they wouldn't happen. I would always do well enough to cover the bills. I would always do well enough to stroke my ego by being towards the top of the leaderboard at work, etc. But I never actually hit the goals I had for myself. And what I now know is I wasn't a match for it. Like I just wasn't a match for it, because I would look at the goals and I would feel not worthy. I would feel not good enough. Like I had a goal of making $1 million, and I would look at that and there was a part of me that didn't feel worthy of it. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, I constantly was in this like striving mode, but there was a gap right between me and my goals. And this actually, what happened for me when I started doing the inner work first and working on my own, just self-love and self-validation, I actually got to the point where it was like, I didn't care if I made the money. I didn't care what the results were. I just cared about feeling good. And I felt finally so in love with myself and with my life that I felt whole for the first time in my life that I can remember since I was probably a baby. And then the things came, then the clients came, then the opportunities came, then the money came that I've been seeking for so long. But it was almost like, not that it didn't matter, because I was grateful. And because, to your point earlier, when your heart's in the right place, you can do a lot of really good things with more money and more flow. And so I think I was able to receive it when it came in a very different way than I would have if I got it earlier. But it spawned this concept that I call now selling from wholeness versus selling from lack. And I think this is something that a lot of people in sales roles or entrepreneurs, don't realize they're doing. It's like when we have a goal outside of us and we're seeking it. I was working with a client maybe a year ago. He also wanted to make $1 million. And I always ask clients why, when they say like, why do they have a certain income goal? He was working in corporate software sales. And I was like, why is that important to you? And, he kind of he thought about it, and he sat back, and I could just see his shoulders kind of slumped. And he was like, if I'm being honest, I'll finally feel validated. And it was like, I totally appreciated his honesty. And that's how most of us approach goals. And he never would have done it, or he would have hit it and not been able to keep it and maintain it if he was doing it from that energy, because it was all about making something outside of him validate the internal, which is the opposite of how we want to create when we're creating using energy and alignment. And so it spawned this concept of selling from wholeness, which is like, when you do the inner work to heal the wounds you need to heal, to feel whole, to fall in love with yourself again. And then again, we're emanating a different vibration. We're putting out a different frequency, one of wholeness. Then you can't help but bring to you clients, opportunities, situations that mirror back who you're being. But it comes at a place where it's almost like the cherry on top, because you're already feeling so good. And then it's just easier. It's like sales conversations are easier. Clients are easier. Referrals are easier. Business is easier. Life is easier, because you're not trying to get anything outside of yourself anymore. Does that make sense? And does that help answer the question?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I love the way you kicked it off, because my friend, his name's Derek Grant, he said that your net worth will never exceed your self-worth. So basically the same way that you said that. And the way I think about it is, a lot of people get down and quit making goals because they write down a goal and it doesn't happen. But writing down the goal itself doesn't bring it to you. You have to believe in it. So you can very easily write something down that you don't believe in. I want to make $1 million. That's my goal. I wrote it down. But if I don't feel like I'm worthy of it, or I'm afraid that if I do make $1 million, that'll make me greedy and bad things will happen to me because my focus is wrong, then that will never come because you don't allow it. So to me, the way this works is you have to, Derek always told me, you have to embody this version of yourself, and that the physical world takes time to catch up. So I see myself in this future version. I'm already walking around as if I'm him. I just have to wait for the physical world to catch up. And there's a difference between writing something down and wanting it to already believing that that is you, and you're embodying that. And the way that the analogy he gave me that I loved, and I actually have a record player in my room because of it. He said that every version of us already exists if you get into quantum physics. So it's like a record player. If you want to be this version of yourself, you just pick the needle up and you go drop it on that track, and you move yourself further out. And then it takes time for the physical world to catch up. And when I look back over my journey, that's exactly what happened. And what I hope happens through my content with Pursuit and what I'm writing about today is this, in 5 years or maybe even less, will be a proof of concept along the way. Everybody's going to be watching me as I move towards this future version of myself. And when I get there, you can go back and check all the receipts. All these types of conversations that you and I are having and the other ones I've had are all a progress showing that this is true. We just have to wait for me to get there. And then I can say, hey, look at all this stuff that I talked about and where I'm at today. You saw it as it happened. You just didn't know it in the moment.
That's so good. It's so good. And I think if I can just add one thing too, like knowing that scientifically we create in time lag, like remembering that and knowing that, because people will get caught up in, I wrote it down on the paper. Where is it? It didn't happen. And we have to remember, like, there's a time lag, and this is my belief, so people can take it or leave it, but I believe time lag exists, and it's actually a beautiful thing because we've all had fleeting thoughts of like, oh, I wish that thing happened to that person, or I like, we'll say stuff like, oh, I wish I was dead. Well, what if we lived in an environment where literally what we thought in the instant came to fruition? I think that time lag is a beautiful thing because it gives us the opportunity to, number one, shore up, is this actually what I want? And then number two, again, it's that gap. There's a period of time that has to pass from when we set the intention to when the thing happens. But if we don't remember that, and if we get impatient or frustrated or in lack, like, where is it? Then again, we're not a match for it. So you actually have to match first the thoughts, the emotions. I love how you were mentioning, like, you're already living this new reality in your mind and in your heart. And that's what I was doing along the way too. When I had that incredible experience, I saw it. I started seeing myself as someone different. I started speaking differently. I noticed my words. I wouldn't say something that I didn't want to have happen. Like, I held myself to a much higher standard. I started asking, how would the woman who has this result show up? How would she feel? How would she act? And I just started kind of pretending to be her. And then the physical finally caught up, right? But you're on the right track because emotion precedes manifestation. You're on the right track if you start to feel better, you start to feel a little more excited, you start to feel a little more peaceful, you start to feel a little more maybe grateful, and you hold that state and you hold the vision. The physical must catch up to match. And it's just a matter of time. So I just wanted to add that in because it's something I didn't understand for so long, and it got me tripped up. And I think a lot of people kind of get tripped up on that aspect.
Yep. And I just had a thought come up that I want to go down a different path. It's still all connected to everything, but not on the outline I sent you. So this is perfectly fitting. Yeah. So you're a mom. You've got 2 boys. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the head trash that people have to work through is a byproduct of society. Telling us what our lives are supposed to look like, what a career path is supposed to look like. Again, everything we're talking about goes against what we're taught in schooling, and it comes to us naturally because of our environment. How do you plan to instill these values and this information into your boys as they get older? Because I have boys that are at an age now where they're not quite old enough to really understand this stuff, but I want that. Like, I realized I understood this stuff at 40. Can I help Roman, Leo, and Silas understand this at 20? And what does that mean for their lives and my grandchildren's lives and all that? So how do you think about bringing this to being a parent with your kids?
Oh my gosh. I love that question. It's everything. How old are your boys again? Remind me.
So Roman will be 13 this summer. Leo's 10 and Silas is 5.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, there's such good ages to be teaching this. And if you study the science behind it, ages 0 to 7, right? Roughly, you're basically a walking subconscious. You don't have the analytical mind formed yet. And so your ability, this is where all the belief systems are formed. And so your ability to be programmed, like, that's when most of us get our programming, or it's when we all get most of our programming, is ages 0 to 7, because whatever we hear, we have to take in as truth. And so, gosh, I mean, I know I've said and done things that have not modeled what I hope my boys end up believing and embodying. And I've had to give myself some grace, because once you know this, it can be easy to beat up on yourself as a parent too, where you're like, oh man, I just programmed him with this limiting belief, and this isn't what I wanted to do. And so I've had to give myself some grace to make mistakes. But we try, we're not perfect with it. We try to be so conscious about our speech. I have stuff playing in the background. Like, I'll have Bob Proctor, I'll have Joe Dispenza playing in the background. We talk about affirmations with our 2-year-old. Like, he does affirmations with us every morning. I don't know if he totally gets it, but like, we try to make them fun. So we have this whole routine we go through with him. We talk about how we're meditating. He sees us meditating. And I trust that, I think from what I understand, it's way more about the experience that we create, or the example that we create. And so him just seeing, my husband and me try our best. Like when we mess up, we talk through it with him logically, be like, hey, mommy got frustrated, or daddy lost his temper, and here's what happened, or I wasn't intentional about my words there. So I know they're going to have their own journey to follow as well there, but we're doing our best to set an example and to kind of use these ages where they are so programmable to try to get in as much good as we can. But I think the beautiful thing about kids is no matter how old your kids are, like you discovered this at 40. I think I really got into it around age like 35. You can change, like whenever you're meant to connect with the information, you can change, and kids are so programmable too. So it's never too late to start.
I do think the key is them seeing more than trying to lecture to them.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that kind of overrides it as well. One of the tough things that I feel as a parent is, you mentioned they're going to have their own journey. And I don't think I come from a point of wanting to protect them, more so as I just want to give them this knowledge that I have. Like, I think a lot of parents want to protect their kids from failure and getting, like, I want them to fail because there's lessons in failure. So I'm not trying to protect them from that. I just want to give them the knowledge that I think will help them bypass a lot of, maybe it is pain I'm trying to avoid for them. But anyways, that's the thing that's tough for me is, like, as I look at them, I don't view it as flaws, but I know there's things that if they could improve, it would set them on an awesome path. But I can't force them to change who they are. And being a parent and accepting that they are who they are, and really I can't change them. I can just give them data for them to process and connect with it when the time is right. Like, that's the hard part for me. So you'll probably handle better than I am, because again, you knew this while the kids were earlier, so you give yourself some more grace. Like, now I'm trying to reverse those things and then reverse my conditioning of being a parent for 13 years of thinking about it one way, and now realizing, hey, I have to back off and not get frustrated because he didn't do that thing that I want him to, because that's who he is. And I have to embrace and love him for who he is, and then help him figure these things out. So Totally. And this could be a whole separate podcast interview, right. But I firmly believe that we choose our parents. And so I would just believe that your boys chose you at the time that they came through you and your wife specifically because they wanted to learn everything from you guys, right? So it's like they chose the right time to come. They chose you specifically. So that's the one thing that, like, okay, I can breathe. Like, I'm here to not be perfect for them, but try to model growth and model self-compassion and help them get some contrast too, so they can go be on their journey and learn some things for themselves. So we all do the best we can with what we have, right? I'm sure you've seen the movie Soul, right? The Disney movie Soul.
Mm-hmm.
I love that movie. But to the point of choosing your parents, like, all the little souls jump down. So, like, it's to me, it's crazy looking at some of the things that, like, Disney and just Hollywood put in front of us that we take as entertainment, but really it's like, hey, no, pay attention to this stuff because there's truth behind it. And Soul is one of those movies, and there's a bunch of Disney movies that I love watching, looking for the deeper meaning behind things, which I think is interesting.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Yeah. Quick side note. I was listening to an interview last night with Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton. Do you follow either of them? Or,
I'll check them out though.
You would, I mean, it's all about this. It's the science. It's the biology of belief. It's very aligned with this conversation. You'd be, I think, very fascinated by them. They've got a ton of stuff on Gaia. But they were just talking about how this concept that consciousness informs itself through art, media, music. And they were talking about movies like The Matrix, Avatar, where it's like we watch them and there's this deep inner knowing that actually helps evolve our consciousness as humanity and as a society. And so it's a super fascinating concept, but it's very aligned with what you're saying. And there's a lot of truth in entertainment when we look at it like that. Yeah.
I have a subscription to Gaia, so I have to go check that stuff out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll send you the link. It's awesome.
All right, I have to apologize to listeners because I wasted 10 minutes of our interview time just talking to Elyse beforehand. So I want to hit some of the fun questions, but before we get to the 5 quick questions and then kind of lead out the episode, is there, if somebody is back where you were in your 10 years of struggle, what would you tell them is the first thing they should try to do to begin to kind of free themselves and open themselves up to kind of go down a journey? If somebody is out there wanting to kind of head the direction we've gone, but doesn't know how to get started?
Yeah, gosh. I mean, I think it comes down to studying. It's like you've got to re-educate yourself on how things work. And again, I'm always about you've got to do your own research and make the decision for yourself. So I'll never tell someone that this has to be your truth. All I can share is my own experience. But if you grew up like I did and you weren't exposed to it and you find yourself stuck, struggling in any way, shape, or form, I would just ask myself, okay, is what I'm doing working? And if not, maybe, and this is what it took for me, it took dropping my ego and being open to maybe there's another way. Let me just be open-minded. And I would start studying. I think I always recommend my clients start with, it's actually on Gaia, the series Rewired by Joe Dispenza, because I think it explains the science behind all of this beautifully. So I'd say start there and just come with an open mind and form your own conclusions.
And the only thing I would add to that is, there's probably skepticism that this could be true. And my comeback is, well, if what you're doing isn't working and you're not happy and you're not living your authentic life, what do you have to lose by trying it? Like, if it doesn't work, you're right back where you were already. So you're no worse off. But if it happens to work, then you've changed everything. So I think that's great. And that's a good lead into the first of my kind of random questions. So I'll link to Gaia so people can see what it is, but it's basically kind of a library of content in this realm. I think it's like $100 a year or something. But if we didn't want to go the Gaia route, what would you say is your favorite book on this subject?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
The subject is broad. Anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you gotta be willing to read through the science, but I think this is the book you pulled out on our first call, maybe Becoming Supernatural. I would say read that book, read Becoming Supernatural. That's another Joe Dispenza book. It talks about the science. I have so many that I could recommend, but I think that's a great one that will help you see and understand the science. And then there's a lot of real world studies involved in that too. And like personal stories that kind of bring it to life.
The science behind it all is what really excited me and had pulled me in even more to know that it's not just like feelings and experiences. There's actual science that shows that there is truth to behind this. Now, there's sciences that show everything, but at least I know I can fall back on. There's a study that says like this stuff is true in these scenarios.
Yeah.
All right. Change of pace. Being a mom with newborn and toddler, what is your favorite toddler activity? So when you're playing with your oldest, what's your favorite thing to do with them?
Oh my gosh. I love that. He loves going to the farm. And where we live right now, there's a lot of farms all around. So the child is obsessed with going to the farm, chasing chickens around. Not quite big enough to ride horses yet, but I think he will be soon. And so that's kind of our go-to.
All right. And then if you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing? Or is there something you've always wanted to do, but you've never done? So the example I always give is I would love to be a music producer. That would, if I was doing something else, that would be it, hip hop. So what if you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing?
I'm going to give you two quick ones. One, which I'm going to do, is launch a media company, because that's one of the dream lives, that I'm going to do that. But I also think I could very well go down the route of becoming a shaman, which is totally left field. But there's a part of my soul that's like, I could really go that route and enjoy that thoroughly too.
All right. And then finally, when you think about your work, how do you define success for the work that you do with your clients or in everything that you do? Because you do more than just the client work. You've got your content and everything else. So how do you define success?
Yeah, I am fairly certain, this is from just a fair amount of self-study, that one of my biggest life purposes is to give a voice to the voiceless. And so I aim to do that through the podcast, through coming in and empowering our clients to actually advocate and speak up for what they want and then achieve it in their lives as well. And I'll say the mindset that also I've been really playing with and having a lot of fun with lately too. This is from, I don't know if you've ever read The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, but
I've seen it. I haven't read it, but I've seen it.
So powerful. You would love it. You would absolutely love it. But he talked about his whole approach to business, and this actually had him build a $1 billion plus company. His approach to life and business was, I'm going to just do my very best with whatever is put in front of me with zero regard for personal gain. And that's how I am approaching life, business, family life as well. And I find that it's just very cool synchronicities happen. And we're able to show up in our most powerful present way to serve what's in front of us with that mindset too. So that to me is success. Like however much I can do that throughout the day and stay there in that zone, that is a successful day, which will compound to create a successful life and career.
Okay. Now, my favorite question I ask everybody. So you do a lot of public speaking, and I don't know how often you get to come out to a song and if you get to choose it, but your next speaking engagement, they let you pick the walkout song. What would you pick and why?
Yeah. So and this actually is my walkout song. It's called Take Up Spaces. It's by Tony Jones, who, if you are not familiar with Tony, you would probably also really like her. It's definitely music geared towards women, I would say. But it's affirmation music. And she's a life coach turned affirmation artist. It's really vibey, really great music, and probably another story for another day, but more law of attraction. We ended up getting connected. She came and spoke at my retreat a couple months ago. She's amazing. And so her music is my walkout song, and love her and love what she's up to in the world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds good. All right. Well, I know I'm running out of my time with you today. Hopefully we can do this again in the future and kind of elaborate on things that have happened. But where can everybody follow you? If they want to work with you, they want to know what you're doing, they just want to consume your content, where would they be able to find you?
Yeah, thanks so much. Absolutely. ElyseArcher.com is the hub of all the things. We've got some great free resources on there too. I'm at Elyse Archer on all social. And if you reach out, would love to connect further. Let me know that you came from Justin's podcast and community, and we'll take amazing care of you and would love to connect.
Awesome. Well, I'll have obviously links to all that in the show notes as we podcast hosts do, but that way everybody can find you very easily. So, Elyse, I want to thank you for this awesome conversation. 50 minutes flew by. There's so much more we could have gone and so much we didn't even touch on. So I want to thank you for coming and bringing your expertise and your story and being vulnerable and sharing some of your personal life as well that's led you to where you are today. So I'm very appreciative of your time and your energy as well. And everybody watching and listening, thank you for tuning in. And as always, make sure you leave some comments for Elyse so she can get some feedback on what resonated with you. Less about me, more about her. Let her know that she's making an impact, because as a guest on a podcast, it's nice to get that feedback back. So with that, I will let you go, Elyse. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining me on my pursuit. It is an honor to be a part of yours. And let's keep pursuing.